Salvete omnes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me as we continue our journey through Caesar. This video is a little bit different than some of my others. You don't necessarily care about the background, but I didn't make this video last year. The person I was making this video or these videos for, I met with them in person or over a Zoom meeting or something, so I never had to make this video. Here it is, like a year late. We're going to talk about Caesar, Book 1, Section 2, Chapter 2, whatever you want to call it. We have just been introduced to Gaul. Caesar's just started his book, giving us a little bit of an geography and ethnography about Gaul. And now he's going to start talking about a particular Gaul. So, that being said, we'll just dive right in. Renji is going to help me out today. So, first sentence. Apud Helvetios longe nobilissimus fuit et ditissimus Orgetorix. I encourage in lots of my other videos, you obviously haven't seen them yet, but a thing I like to encourage is, as much as you can, take the words as they come. Latin word order can be very fluid, very flexible, doesn't match up perfectly with English word order. But with Caesar, you can oftentimes kind of follow along, especially with some of the shorter sentences. Longer sentences may be a little bit harder. But apud Helvetios, among the Helvetians, right? He's talked about the Helvetians in the last passage. Longe nobilissimus. This is a phrase or a structure that we'll use in English. The most noble by far. I would translate by far. It's obviously long, right, or longly. So among the Helvetians, by far the most noble was, again, I'm doing very distinct or very direct word over. The most noble was, and the richest, Orgetorix. Obviously, that word was a little bit weird. I would probably put fuit after dutissimus in English, right? Among the Helvetians, by far the most noble and rich was Orgetorix. So he's going to be our focal point. He is the most noble and the most wealthy by far among Helvetians. Actually, I'll do the Latin. I'm out of practise. Is Marco Messala et Publio Marco Pisone consulibus regni cupiditate inductus coniurationem nobilitatis fecit et civitate persuasit ut de finibus suis cum omnibus copiis exirent per facile esse cum virtute omnibus praestarent totius Galliae imperio potiri. All right. Third person pronoun, just referring to Orgetorix. Slightly unusual that he uses is here. I might expect something like qui, or maybe hic, this guy, who I just mentioned. But here just uses the regular third person pronoun, which is perhaps a bit more common in Caesar than some of the other authors we've covered. He. And this next part will be, you should have a note in your textbook. It's definitely, and Clive's going to help us too. It's a little bit harder. If you don't know what you're looking for or expecting, it can be tricky to read. It is an ablative absolute to tell us the year. Every year you had a different set of consuls in Rome, and so you could mark the years by who was consul, and oftentimes that is done with an ablative absolute. So these should all be ablatives. With Marcus Messala and Publius Marcus Piso, with them as consuls, ablative absolute. Ablative absolute without any verb or participle. There's no being verb participle, so we just with this noun as this noun. So with these guys as consuls, or when these guys were consuls, Orgetorix is going to do something. All right, is. So we can kind of pull this out. I don't know if your textbook puts parentheses around it. This might be something where I'd almost put parentheses or maybe commas around it. He, Orgetorix, Regni cupiditate inductus. Inspired by, encouraged by, led on by, driven might be a good way of translating it. Driven by, and a perfect passive participle, like inductus, we'll want to look for an ablative, and cupiditate is going to do that for us. Driven by desire. What sort of desire? We get regni here, genitive. Driven by a desire of a kingdom. So a rex is a king, a regnum is the kingdom. So he's driven by desire of a kingdom. Right now, he's just a wealthy nobleman in Helvetia. He would like a little bit more than that. So driven by this desire of a kingdom, coniurationem nobilitatis fecit. He made a plot. He made a... He designed a plot, whatever you do to plots. He made a plot, nobilitatis. This is who's involved in the plot. Literally, he made a plot of the nobility. In English, it might make more sense to say something like with the nobility. But he's getting together with his other noble Helvetians to make this plot. So he made a plot of the nobility, and Civitati persuasit. He persuaded the citizens, the civitas, the state as a whole, the nation. He convinced the citizens, ut, indirect command following the verb persuasit. So we're going to have ut plus a subjunctive, or two. Looks like one subjunctive. He persuaded the citizenry to de finibus suis cum omnibus copiis exerent. Two prepositional phrases, de finibus suis and cum omnibus copiis. If you can like start packaging or get used to kind of like packaging and trying to divide up the sentence into smaller chunks, it can make it a lot easier, especially if nothing else, recognizing prepositional phrases. All right. Takes a long time to figure out what he persuaded them to do, but once we see there's just a couple of prepositions, we can hop right to the verb. He persuaded them to leave, from their borders, and to leave cum omnibus copiis, to leave with all of their supplies, all of their stuff, their resources. So a max exodus out of Helvetia, and well, they got to go somewhere else, and that might require a little bit of warfare, which we'll see in future chapters. So Argetorix has made this plot with the nobility, or this plan, maybe it's slightly more innocent, made this plan of the nobility, and persuaded the citizens to leave from their land with all of their stuff. Persuasit here, pulling double duty. It is introducing two different clauses. It's introducing this indirect command. So persuasit followed by ut and a subjunctive. It's also introducing an indirect statement, which uses the accusative and infinitive construction. So he persuaded them to do this, and he persuaded them that, or he said that, it was easy. Esse per facile. So indirect statement, here's your infinitive. This is an accusative. It's a neuter accusative adjective of the third declension. Doesn't look very much like an accusative. There's no doubt about that. It looks much more like an ablative, but it is a third declension adjective in the neuter singular. So it would be easy. So what would be easy? This would be easy, right? He persuaded them to leave, and he persuaded them that it would be easy. Cum virtute omnibus praestarent. This cum is a tricky cum here. Because when we first learn cum clauses, at least in my class, we learn that if cum is followed by an ablative, it's probably the preposition with. If cum is followed by anything else, it's a cum clause, right? When this happens. Cum here is, in fact, followed by an ablative, virtute. However, it's not a preposition. It is a cum clause going with praestarent down here. So it would be easy when and I'll start as when. When they praestarent, they stand before, they surpass. They surpass omnibus, praestarent taking a dative here. The person or thing that you stand in front of or surpass is going to be in the dative. So they surpass everyone, virtute, ablative of means. They surpass everyone by means of courage, manliness. You could translate it as virtue, but virtus is much more kind of courage or manliness. It's not as kind of generally upstanding as virtue might be in modern English. So cum here is a cum clause. Cum plus a subjunctive. Normally we translate that as when or while. There are a couple other ways you can translate cum. You could translate cum as since. You could also translate it as although. I always tell people it's, you're never wrong to translate a cum clause as when. Like, that will get the point across, but you might want to go back and fix it. So, again, he persuaded them that it would be easy when they surpassed everyone in courage. It's actually since here. It would, because if you say when, it's kind of, I think, the idea that it eventually they will become stronger and then it will be easy. He's saying it's right now, right? Since they surpass everyone in courage, it will be easy for them to do this now. So cum I would translate as since. If you translate it as when or while, it's not wrong. It's just not perhaps the best way to translate that. So it would be easy to leave. So kind of going with this, it would be easy for them to leave with all their stuff. But also, it would be easy, totius Gallia imperio potiri, another infinitive. What would it be easy for them to do? To potiri, totius Gallia, to kind of gain control of, is potiri. It's related to potest, to be able, and it can mean to kind of like take control of, have power over. So kind of take control of the of all of Gaul, and take control of the empire of all of Gaul. If you want to translate it as empire, I don't know that empire is necessarily the best way to translate it. But a grammar point is escaping me right now, so I've got to double check something. I don't do that. So potior can take a genitive or an ablative, and it means to acquire, to put, to get hold of, to get power of. It can take a genitive and an ablative, and so I'm not exactly sure how you want to check the notes in your textbook. Oh, I've got my textbook with me. Sorry, I'm more unprepared for this than I expected. Let me double check how somebody much smarter than me suggests you translate this. Because you could say they would get control, like they would kind of like bring all of Gaul under their control, or they would gain control of the empire of all of Gaul. And so I want to see exactly how he thinks this potiri should be used. Don't tell me it's an ablative with a special deponent verb. I know that. So I think the suggestion is they would gain control of the empire of all of Gaul, or they would get control of the power, the authority. Maybe translate imperium as authority. They would gain authority over all of Gaul. All right. Caesar continues. Id hoc technically Orgetrix continues. Id hoc facilius is persuasit, quod undiqua loci natura helveti continentur. Una ex parte flumine reno latissimo adqua altissimo, qui agrum helvetium a Germanis devidit. Alter ex parte monte jura altissimo, qui est inter Sequanos et Helvetios. Tertia lacu lemano et flumine rodano, qui provinciam nostram ab Helvetis devidit. So, some more geography here. So, again, Caesar using it where we might expect a relative pronoun. So he, or Getrix, persuaded them of this. All right, so he persuaded them of this thing that I've talked about. Again, I might expect a relative pronoun, which thing he persuaded them. But again, Caesar seems to be fond of the just third person pronoun here. He persuaded them, facilius, comparative adverb with an ius ending. He persuaded them more easily or rather easily. Either one, I think, makes sense. Quite easily, something like that. He persuaded them quite easily, hoc. And hoc here, adverb, by means of this thing. And I think what the hoc is doing here is anticipating the quote. He persuaded them with this fact. That, or you could translate it as because. So it kind of depends on how you work. Ultimately, the quote and the hoc are somehow linked, right? He persuaded them more easily because by this, because, etc., or by the fact, by this fact that, and then he's got multiple points. So he persuaded them because on all sides, undiqua, the Helvetians were contained. The Helvetians are hemmed in, natura loci, by the nature of their location. So it's natural borders that we're going to see as a problem here. It's not that they aren't strong enough to defeat the enemies around them. It's that, well, we're going to see there's the nature of the location around them. On one side, una ex parte. On one, you can translate that as on one side. You could say literally from one part, but on one side. And let me double check. Yeah. Continentor is kind of going to be doing a bit of governing over the next couple of sections. They are contained by ablatives, right? The Helvetians are contained by the nature of the location. On one side, they are contained by the Rhine River, Flumine Reno. The Rhine River, very wide and very deep. You can put these adjectives wherever you want. So they're contained by the very wide and very deep Rhine River on one side. Again, you can play with word order however you want. Follow it in the natural word order that we've got. On one side, by the Rhine River, very wide and deep. This Rhine River, which divides the field or the land of the Helvetians, or I should say the Helvetian land, both accusative. It divides the Helvetian land a Germanis from the Germans. So that would be the east part of this, right? The Helvetians, modern day Switzerland. So if you're looking at a modern map, on the east side of Switzerland, you're going to have the Rhine River and the Germans. Altera ex parte, on a second side, they are contained, they are hemmed in by Monte Jura Altissimo, by Mount Jura, very tall. So by the very tall Mount Jura, or however you want to deal with that. Notice Altissimo for the river is very deep. Altissimo for the mountain, very high. It's just vertically great. The very tall mountain Jura, which est inter Sequanos et Helvetios, which is between the Sequani and the Helvetii. So again, if you look at a map and your book has maps in it, at least the book that I use in my class has maps in it, you can see where the Sequani are in relation to the Helvetians and whatnot. And this is just kind of, I believe, a part of the Alps. And so this would be the Rhine River is kind of east, northeast. Your mountains are more west, kind of northwest. Tertia. And we don't have anything else here. Tertia, it's Tertia ex parte. I'll mention later in other videos. I mentioned in class, Caesar, very efficient with his language. So he repeated ex parte once, but he doesn't need to do it a third time. And so he will leave sections out. However, he does this when kind of like once a pattern has been established. So you get this prepositional phrase from one part, you get an ablative describing what the Helvetians are reined in by, and then you get a relative clause explaining how they are hemmed in by that. Same thing here. Referencing to a second part, the ablative showing what they are hemmed in by, then a relative clause explaining how they are hemmed in by that. You're going to get the same thing here. Tertia ex parte, from the third side, or from a third part on the third area, they are hemmed in by Lacu Lemano et Flumine Rodano, by Lake Lemanus and the Rodanus River, which is modern day Rhone River, I think. So by these two bodies of water, qui, relative clause explaining how these two things are hemming them in. The Lake Lemanus and the Rhone River, which divides our province, Provinciam Nostrum, from the Helvetians. Caesar is the governor of what would be modern day northern Italy. This is called the province. It's called Cisalpine Gaul. It's a section of Gaul that is on the Roman side of the Alps, so Cisalpine. And this is what's going to cause issues. Spoilers, right? They've got the Helvetians are very close, and so Caesar knows about all this, and they might be causing problems with their desire to leave their area. Spoilers, a little bit. So, I'll go through all that again. It's kind of like hopefully a smoother sentence. Vercingetorix has told them, hey, we could take over all of Gaul. He persuaded them of this more easily due to the reason that on all sides, the Helvetians are contained by the nature of the location. On one side, they are controlled or hemmed in by the Rhine River, very wide and very deep, which divides the Helvetian land from the Germans. On another side, they are hemmed in by the very tall Jura mountain, which is between the Sequani and the Helvetians. On the third side, they are hemmed in by Lake Lemanus and the Rhone River, which divides our province, or separates our province, from the Helvetians. So, geography, you can look at a map and see very clearly what Caesar's talking about there. His rebus fiebat, ut et minus late vagarentur, et minus facile finitimus bellum inferre possent, qua ex parte homines bellandi cupidi magno dolore ad ficie bantur. All right. His rebus fiebat, it's kind of an odd word. It's kind of the passive of facio. It looks active. It's kind of passive. To be made, to become, or to happen. And so, what do I want to go with here? It was happening, I think, is how I would translate it in this case. And we can go back and change it as I move through the sentence. It was happening by these things, all right? So his rebus referring to this last sentence I talked about, this kind of being hemmed in by nature. It was happening because of these things it was happening that et minus late vagarentur, et minus facile finitimus bellum inferre possent. Result clause going with fiebant. It was happening with the result that we get this weirdly placed et. And what I will encourage you to do throughout other videos is if you see a weirdly placed et, look for another one. There's no reason for an et to come this soon in a result clause. And so if we look around, we get another et. So we have this, when we have this et blank et pattern, it's going to be like a both and translation. And we can use that to our advantage in translating because, again, Caesar kind of likes parity. If he's going to translate something one way or going to use one phrase, we just saw it in the last sentence, if he's going to say multiple things along that line, he's going to use that same kind of structure and pattern. So we get et minus latte vagarentur, et minus facile. So we getting that minus latte, minus facile. And then we get our verb vagarentur and posset inferre. Obviously, he elaborates a little bit here, but the pattern is still structurally the same. So what two things are happening on account of these things? It's happening that they both were wandering. Vagarentur is deponent verb here, referring to Helvetians. They are wandering around, roaming. I'm trying to think of a better word than that. Just kind of traveling. They were traveling less widely. Less widely than they would like is like the understood idea here, right? So they can't move around as wide as they would like, and they were able, minus facile, less easily, to bring war against their neighbors. So, and again, less easily than they would like. So, because of these things, it was happening that they were traveling less widely or less far, and they were able to bring war against their neighbors less easily. Qua ex parte, homines bellandi cupi magno dolor africae bantor. And qua ex parte, it's not really a... We saw the ex parte up here being like a literal... it's a physical like border, right? From one side, literally one side of their region. Here, it's not that. It's more of like a reason, like from this reason. So like for its part, it kind of goes to the more abstract idea of part, right? And for this part, men, bellandi cupidi. Cupidi, so these words, not all the same form. Homines, nominative plural. Cupidi, also nominative plural. These are men eager for something. Eager or desirous of something. Bellandi is a gerund. We don't see a lot of gerunds, certainly not in our textbook, and we don't really see a lot of gerunds throughout Latin, at least what we will be reading. A gerund is a verb turned into a noun. So bellandi is like to wage war, warring. But this is now the concept of warring. So these are men eager of warring or of making war. It's a gerund, the nd there, like the nd in gerund. And this is the genitive singular ending. What are they desirous of? What are they eager of? They are desirous of warring. So, on account of this, right? For this part, that is the fact that they can't roam very widely or wage war very easily. On account of that, these men, eager for war, were affected, were overcome, adfice bator, with a great sadness. Magno dolore. Ablative of means, going with your passive verb. So they're very sad that they can't just kind of roam around the world and wage war on whoever gets in their way. All right, last sentence. Pro multitudine altem hominum et pro gloria belli atqua fortitudinis angusto se fines habera arbitrabantur, qui in longitudinem milia passum ducenti quadriginta, in latitudinem centum octoginta patebant. All right. We get this nice kind of echo, this kind of repetition of Caesar. So, pro multitudine hominum. Pro here on account of. I don't think it means like in front of. It's just, I think, on account of in this case. On account of the multitude of men, however, and on account of the glory of war and strength. So two genitives here describing glory. So what sort of glory? The glory of war and the glory of fortitude, of strength. So on account of the number of men, on account of the glory of battle and strength, we get an indirect statement here off of Arbitra Bantur. Indirect statement, right? They thought that. They judged that. They said that. They say they thought that they had, your infinitive, so you go to your accusative and infinitive. They thought that they had angustos fines. They thought that they had narrow borders. So their land is too small based upon the number of them, and their glory for war. It's like we are much stronger than our land would suggest. We deserve more land because we are stronger. So on account of those things, they judged that their borders were narrow. Borders, fines, which in length, in longitude, were milia passum ducenti quadriginta, which in length were 240 miles. Milia passum, if you see that phrase, you can just translate it as miles. Literally, it means thousands of paces. So milia meaning thousands, passum, paces, passes. So it's literally 240,000 steps across. A step, for the way the Romans measured steps, is not the step between like your right foot and your left foot. It's the distance that one foot travels. So the distance from one right foot to the second right foot. So 2 paces, 2 steps, if you want to count it that way. And it's roughly, 1,000 paces is roughly 5,000 miles for a Roman. And so it's a little bit shorter than our modern mile, but it's pretty close. And so it's 240 miles. It pretty much matches up. So, borders, which were in length 240 miles, in latitude, in width, or whatever, 180. Patebant, I guess, different verb. So I said were. They stretched out for patebant. Borders which stretched out in length 240 miles, in width 180. All right, that does it for chapter 2, and that should do it for this video, and it should do it for all of Caesar. I think I've got all of Caesar finished now. If you find out that I don't, let me know, and I will definitely correct that. That said, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can comment down below. I don't check this as much as I did last year because of COVID, so not as reliable, but you can comment there. You can email me if you know how to get a hold of me, talk to me in class, whatever the case may be. Thank you very much again for watching. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm a real YouTuber. Ha ha ha. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.